Welcome to Refirement Life, the podcast for anyone navigating life transitions or planning to make life transitions to ensure your next years are your best years. Listen in for insightful, generous, and sometimes humorous conversation. It's time to get fired up with Christine Zamuda and Muge Wood, your hosts for this latest episode of Refirement Life.
Hello, and welcome to episode 37 of Refirement Life. This is your host, Christine Zamuda, with my amazing co-host, Muge Wood. And today we're going to talk about who and how we spend our time and why it matters. There's been a interesting research study on on how Americans spend their time, and we were inspired by a podcast by Mel Robbins on the topic, which we will link to our notes so you can listen to the whole thing. But we're going to do a little bit of an excerpt here and just give you all some food for thought. It definitely has us thinking, so we wanted to bring it to our listeners. So Muge, let's start and get into the conversation here. I think just as we bring our listeners along, a little mental quiz. So let's see if you can, and listeners, please think along with us. Can you name the last 5 artists who won Artist of the Year?
And you can't use the internet.
You can't use the internet, yeah. So off the top of your head, like think of the last 5 years. I'm sure Beyonce was in there.
Taylor Swift could be. I mean,
Taylor Swift was
famous.
Actually, yeah, slightly, yes.
Famous, yep.
Yeah. So that's a possibility. Could you name the last 5 Olympic gold medal winners in women's gymnastics?
Simone Biles.
Yes.
That would make sense.
And
but
she's
then again, yeah.
She's a local girl too, to our area, so we
she's
love her.
Local. Yes, we love her, and she and her husband are building a very nice house north of Houston. So really excited that they continue to stay and invest in the community. Great role models.
Very cool. Yeah, I don't know. I'm like caught in a time warp on gymnastics. I always think about the old school ones that I used to watch.
Yes.
Mary Lou Retton, of course, she's
Nadia
been in the
Comaneci.
news. Yes, Olga Colbert. That's an older
Olga
older
Colbert,
one.
Yes. Well, I grew up with those, watching and just being amazed what they are able to do. That's right.
That's
so
right. Carrie Scruggs, remember the broken ankle?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Wow.
And she's still continued.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's right. I think the other question to amend that's not here yet is our tennis prowess. Also, who are the last 5, U.S. Open champions, etc. And even you and I are both super interested in tennis. We probably couldn't name it with accuracy. I mean, we generally are in the ballpark, but it wouldn't really be accurate completely.
Exactly. And I always pronounce the names wrong too. Especially the Slavic ones. I have a real problem with that. Even though my husband's Polish and we got that real fun name, Zamuda.
well, I think you just spend more time in that part of the world and practice locally. That's what you need to do.
It's on the list actually. All right. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit. So I bet you can name your 5 favorite people that you have worked with. And just think about that. Easy.
Yeah. Easy.
And big smiles.
And unfortunately, the ones that you don't want to work with either also. So like the 2 complementary opposite sides of the coin, but easy, right?
Yep. Yeah. You have a fight between the darkness and the light, huh?
Right. Complete Star Wars, etc. going on here. Yes.
All right. Your 5 favorite memories with your parents or siblings.
Yep.
A
lot of good ones. And the interesting thing, Christine, with this is not only you can think about it a whole lot more readily compared to the previous set, but how it makes you feel, it's just very positive, warm, uplifting feeling to think about these things.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly. And then as we're thinking, I mean, you may have had some people in your life who weren't at work, or you met them along the way and you just miss seeing them, and maybe for whatever reason aren't as easily connected to them in your
Yep.
life, and probably have some great memories there too. Adult friendships that maybe should be rekindled.
That's right. That's right. Because circumstances can sometimes get in the way. And then I like this one too. Your five favorite people you have laughed with. And
Hmm.
I think you're on the list, Christine, because we are laughing as we speak. Like this happens very routinely.
Thank you. Yes,
You're
you're
welcome.
definitely on my list. I was telling Paul, I said, this couple of week break that we had over the holidays, I was like, I feel like I'm missing like a limb. It's Muge. I need to make sure
Yes.
that we are
That's right. Like I said,
connected.
our time together is first and foremost beneficial to me, and hopefully our listeners as well. It's the absolute highlight. So, and
Oh,
for all the reasons that we talk about. Yep.
yeah, I agree. I agree. It's highlight for me too. Something my dad always said, and we always said with our kids growing up, is you are the sum average of the five people you're spending the most time with. So if you think about people who teach you something, who bring out the best in you, who you learn from, those are always great people to have around. Of course, people you laugh with. And then on the reverse, if you're not feeling like your soul is benefiting from the exposure to some people for whatever reason, those are opportunities to just seek out less, should I
Hmm.
say. Yeah.
Yep.
So Mel Robbins had this interesting podcast, and she bounces off of a couple findings from this survey of time. And the first one she shares, really, hit me, and I think it'll hit anyone who has parents that are, fortunately still with us and thriving, surviving. But when you think about family time, if you think about the average age, women are living to like 86, men are living till like 83, typically, depending on what survey you're looking at. And say you do family vacations once a year with your parents. And if your, mom or dad is 75, you may have less than 10 vacations left with them. So thinking about how important that time is, what are you doing when you're there? How do you make that a priority? And really be present as well as just, physically there, right?
Yep, that's very true. So first of all, Christine, thank you so much for highlighting this podcast. It made me think a lot, and I think what really puts things in clear focus is the math behind it. You start doing the math, how many realistically, because sometimes we feel like we have all the time in the world, and we don't. And another thing that's interesting about this particular data, the family time. I think Mal said, based on this study, the time you spend with your family, especially with your kids, levels at the age of 26. So when your kids are 26 and onward, whatever time you usually are spending with them is kind of what it ends up being as a habitual thing. So it becomes really important, I think, to be very intentional to create that time, and make sure it's something that you're investing in, because if you don't, it's probably not going to happen by itself. Given your kids go and build their own lives, and you may be in different cities and places from your family, and you look for that special occasion, whether it's wedding or big milestone birthday that may or may not happen. And one that always strikes me is, people get together pretty rapidly for funerals,
Hmm.
to honor the life of the person who passed on. That's great. I think that's good. But I think we got to show the same care attention to celebrate the living
Hmm.
just as readily, because everybody probably appreciates it even more. So it's just it's a great data point to really help, I think, inform not only how you spend your time, but where you put your energy to make that
Absolutely.
happen. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Celebrating the living. That will, okay. It just sparked a thought in my head. What do you think of people who throw their own celebration of life before they pass?
Well, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea because I try to frame funerals, which is an inevitable part of life, is honoring the life and legacy of that person,
Mhm.
as hard as it may be. So, I mean, as you know, my resolution for the year is champagne lunches and events. So, I mean, that all goes with that spirit of celebration. But that brought up another point. I'm curious about what you're going to say. This celebration of Day of the Dead. That
Mhm.
is, I think, more in the Hispanic culture. I initially did not completely understand it. And of course, a Disney movie came out about it, which helps us all understand things that we have difficulty understanding. And I'm like, that's also neat.
Mhm.
It's a way to honor the people who are no longer with you and make sure we are making time for that. But yeah, I'm all for throwing your own party that goes along with buying your own flowers when you want to. It's good. I guess you just cannot celebrate enough with the
Yeah.
people you want to celebrate with. So I like it.
I agree. And I agree also just finding like quirky ways to celebrate, whether it's Groundhog Day or just, a friend throws a party Galentine's Day instead of Valentine's Day. Just having fun with whatever time we have is great. And I like the idea also of having standing traditions in families. So one of the things my dad did actually, probably I think it was 7 years before he passed away, and he passed away unexpectedly. So we had no idea that this was going to happen. But we had been going to the beach together as a family, always doing 4th of July week. And he made us all around the table, all four girls and their families, promise we would always be together this certain week, no matter what. And we've done that now. I think it's 20 years that we've been together. And, certainly all the cousins look forward to it. We look forward to it. But I've often had, friends say, wow, I really wish my family did that. It's just so hard to find the time. It's hard to line up the schedules. And fortunately, like we figured it out early. That was a great week for my sisters who were teachers, and sometimes they would work during the summer, but 4th of July week is the week, and we
Yeah.
just make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because sometimes I've seen this in my family as well as other families. Uh, One of the parents or both of the parents pass, and then the traditions that held the family together may also vanish.
Hmm.
Unless it becomes an intentional habit or ritual that everybody rallies around, it's easy for things to kind of dissipate, and then you don't see each other as often anymore. The other thing I'll say is, as busy and as important as we all are, I think you can make the time if you really want to.
Hmm.
I mean, you really can. So I think that's that mindset shift and understanding the importance and emergency. I would say emergency of it, urgency of it. You can find a time, which I think Mel is helping us think through in very, very clear terms.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. So let's shift to where we spend our most time and who we spend it with. And you know the answer, Muge.
Yes, your partner.
Yes, yes. Well, that and so let's talk about partners first. The most important decision you're going to make in your life, right?
Yes, yes, very true. Very true. I think a lot of successful, famous people say this as well. We talk about
Mm.
what gives you fulfilling life and success on your own terms. It is certainly, educating yourself and going to the gym and eating nutritious foods and all those kinds of things. But even before any of that, it is who you choose to spend your life with. Because you're going to spend a lot of time with that individual, and how that can be a great experience for you and take you to heights that you didn't think would be possible, and vice versa. So
Yeah.
it is absolutely critical. Yes, I would agree. I think we all would generally agree with that.
Yeah. And especially they say, I mean, when you're 60 or older, you're spending a ton of time with that single person, and the advice is, really think about how does that person make you feel,
Hmm.
right? And I think that so many of us got a taste of what that feels like during COVID. because that was a real primer of compressing your space, compressing your days, nights. That actually might have been even more challenging than regular retirement, right? Because we didn't.
Yes, that was interesting, and it went in either direction. I think some people forged new relationships, and they said COVID was the test that showed us this is the right person because we made this work through this 2-year period. And for some others, they're like, oh, this did not work out the way I thought it would. I am ready to change the scenery here. So yes, it was a real test. Yes.
Yeah, I think Paul and I developed like some relationship hacks. I'm like, oh, you're really chatty today. Which is read between the lines. I need some time by myself.
That's right. That's right. I think it sometimes still happens. And, with my husband, how about your girlfriends? You want to do an outing with them? I'm like, now that you said it, actually, maybe I should.
Here's your phone. Start calling.
Yeah, let's get this energy out of your system. The positive energy you have that is like everywhere.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, the other people we spend a ton of time with are our work colleagues, and it may shock many people, but to think about this number, but the average American spends about 40 years with people they work with. Think about that. Oh my God.
That is a lot. That's also astounding. But also the math is usual. It adds up. And I think one thing that I find helpful, and it was called out in the podcast, is whatever the work is, I think it's really important to find people within your work environment that you can be friends with. And can be part of your community. It really helps because liking the people you work with at some level is really healthy. And I find that in all of my jobs, regardless of where I am, the community centered around that, either directly related to your job or outside, becomes a real lifeline because those people become the sounding board when you want to share something or just start your day. Maybe you are not feeling your best self. You just ping the person, have a conversation, and you feel uplifted. So I think I am a big believer in forming the community, formal or informal, at work, and finding 2, 3, 4, 5 individuals who you can be friends with, and it just makes everything so much better. It really
does. Yeah, it really does. And actually, we had touched upon this in a previous podcast, but friends at work provide a great proclivity to being more engaged at work. And when you're more engaged at work, engaged employees contribute. This stat is fresh in my mind because I was just doing some work on another project, but engaged employees will contribute $13,000 roughly more per employee when they're engaged in revenue. So think about that could add up across a huge organization pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we see all LinkedIn posts on people deciding to retire or move on to something else. And invariably, the common point there is it's the people who I worked with made the most difference and impression on me. And similar to the first 3, 4 questions we discussed, I mean, I don't remember my metrics in a given role from 15 years ago, but I do remember the people I worked with, who I learned from, who I was able to help. And it made it an environment of collaboration and fun that made everything better. The other thing is, I think it's an ongoing quest for companies, organizations to retain talent. And you can do that in a variety of ways. But one way is exactly this, creating that environment of interaction, collaboration, sense of belonging, because people connect you to the place. So it really makes it better, because I think we are all are going to spend that time at work doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Finding your friends at work makes a big difference, and that goes to getting to know people at a personal level instead of a transactional level. You do this, I do this, and
Mm-hmm.
work is over. You get to know people, and even with people perhaps you don't think you have as much in common. Maybe someone is making you really mad, but then you get to know the person and you're like, okay, now I appreciate it. I appreciate where this other person is coming from. So I think win-win all around.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, recognize which people make you feel good. And it's good.
Yes.
Your body is telling you something, that there's something to be learned, something I'm enjoying. And I would offer, don't be afraid to say, hey, would you mind if we connect just, 20 minutes in a couple weeks, just to keep that relationship going, being, a little bit, vulnerable sometimes
Hmm.
to make that connection, ask for that connection, and, give that relationship room to grow.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. And conversely, I would say, if you're not feeling great about your colleagues, your boss, your work environment, start today to start looking for, how do I change the situation? How do
Hmm.
I find something else that would benefit me more and make me happier overall?
Yep, that's right. And I think you made a great point. We know how people make us feel. Now, do we acknowledge and act on it is something else. And some of it is a little bit through experience and experimentation too. I've been in situations where someone may be complaining a lot about a
Mhm.
given situation, like nonstop. And that's a lot of negative energy day after day. And I'm a believer in, if you don't like a situation that much, then change it, because it's
Mhm.
just not really worth being in that situation and just complaining nonstop. So
Yep.
maybe you reduce your relationship with those individuals. And conversely, someone could be just overly positive all the time and not really
Realistic.
acknowledging a particular challenge. And that can also be a little too much. So you kind of have to find your lane, but it goes back to how the individual made you feel. I think it was Maya Angelou, right, had the famous saying,
Mhm.
um, you always remember how someone made you feel, not what they said, but how they made you feel. It does leave a big impression.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, let's shift gears to another one of the findings, and this question, harkens back to igniting or reigniting friendships that maybe you have, well, not lost, but just haven't been active in, right? So this question is: can you pinpoint the age when you thought you were not seeing your friends as much? Any guess
Yes.
on what time of life that was?
So my husband and I were listening to the podcast on our way to see our son, and we immediately, almost at the same time, said college. Right, at
Hmm.
college, you have this great togetherness, and after graduation, more or less, it starts drifting off. You start getting into a more adult life. You start your work. You may start a family, and there is a sharp drop off. Um,
Hmm.
uh, there really is. And then what do you do with that? Yep.
Agree. Yeah, college. Yeah, that 21, 22. And then I think the other phase, I just remember, having this really tight group of girlfriends in the DC area when we were first working, had very little responsibilities other than to show up 9 to 5. And then the
Yes.
rest of the time we had money, we had, a good amount of time, and we had a ton of energy. So we would,
Yes.
tear up the town, get to work, rinse and repeat. And then all of a sudden, like, we all got in serious relationships. We started, settling down, taking work a little bit more seriously. And then those relationships actually, everyone kind of went their own way, relocations to other places. So we weren't, geographically close. But yeah, that's another, I think, period of life, that 29, 30, that some relationships aren't as accessible.
That's very true because people may move away, and then so you are working full time. Probably your job is taking off, and then you add family responsibilities to it. You need to take care of yourself a little bit in this process as well. So you just simply run out of time, and whatever little time you have left, you may want to spend it just resting. It's not the days of infinite time and energy. So I definitely see that as well. Now, the good news is I think as we go through stages of life, especially the empty nester state, gives you, again, time and possibly energy as well to rekindle those relationships. So as an example, I have two really good friends from college. We were like the trio back in 91 when I first came to the US. They were my first girlfriends that I made here in this country, and we always stay close, but we obviously can't spend that much time together. They are in Pennsylvania, I'm in Texas. And I said, this year will be the year we are going to change that. So they are coming down at the end of February to Houston to enjoy the rodeo and the local amenities. And I convinced them that they are going to meet a lot of cowboys. And it's going to be very interesting. They are shopping for their cowboy hats and the rodeo attire. We are going to make it happen. So I am really looking forward to that. But I give this example to say, you have to put in a lot of effort. It's just not going to happen by meeting at a coffee shop sometimes.
That is awesome. And I can't wait to hear about the escapades of the trio. And I think you should warn them because I remember living in Texas and I remember two-stepping for the first, second, third time when I was down there. And you use different muscles from dancing backwards all night.
Yes. Yeah,
so
that's right.
Those girls are going to be feeling that the next day.
Yes, not to mention what you're wearing. Especially if you try to do the boots and do that, that is a lifestyle. It takes practice. You don't just jump into it.
Yeah. Well, I highly recommend what you're doing. And I did this with two of my high school girlfriends 2 years ago. One living in Michigan, one living in Jersey, but we all had met in Michigan in high school. And they came to town and I showed them all over DC. And we never laughed so hard. We were crying laughing for basically 72 hours.
Yes,
that is
the goal. They have some distinct ideas of what life in Texas is like. So we are going to experience that. Some of it is accurate, some of it is not. So we are not going to have wagon races in the street, but we are going to see that at the rodeo. Ample amount of margarita, barbecue, and assorted activities. So looking forward to that. I think you got to make the effort. It works.
Yes,
it works.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I wouldn't have probably made that effort as much 5 years ago. It's because I was busy. But now that kids are at college, I am getting a little more time and want to use that time wisely.
So great. So great. All right. The last stat that we're going to talk about is one of the findings. They said that older people spend more time alone, but this doesn't necessarily mean they're lonely, which is a really interesting stat. And what it says here is essentially, I think it was something about it was you're not alone, you're with yourself.
Right.
I think was the phrasing that I was looking for, which is very different than being alone. Spending time with yourself, right?
Yes, spending time with yourself, which that was the key message, and which I think is something we need to sit with all throughout, because there's, I think, a lot of reflection and getting to know yourself in that time period. So whether you go for a walk, you read a book, you take yourself to lunch, you sit at a coffee shop, just being comfortable with that, so you get to know yourself even more. I think that's a great thing. So there's always that distinction of being by yourself doesn't mean you're alone or lonely. Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah,
mean you're lonely. So that feeling, I think, is something that comes from within. As we know, you can feel lonely in a big crowd of people. But I think
absolutely.
this one is about how we can cultivate this sense of ease, being
Hmm.
with ourselves, and have a great time
Yeah,
doing that.
agree. And I know people, I'm sure you know people too, who are afraid to do anything by themselves.
Yes,
Afraid to eat in a restaurant, afraid to go to a movie by themselves, afraid to go
afraid to
to a
travel.
concert. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
and you miss out a lot.
Hmm.
You miss out a lot. I think the good thing is, I think as a society, we are being more comfortable with that. We see a lot of activities for solo travelers or people who want to go on vacation by themselves for whatever reason. I think it's becoming more accepted and open. But
Hmm.
yes, at times it can feel a little awkward, especially if you are going on a dinner or lunch by yourself. You're like, okay, what should I do with my hands? Where should I look?
Hmm.
Etc. So but I think being with yourself and listening to your thoughts, and also observing what's going on around you, it can really be very fulfilling.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. One other thing they said was, now when you're alone with yourself, typically like as you get older, 50 to, they say in the studies about 75, loneliness does not increase, but it does increase after 75. And
Hmm.
I imagine, there's some natural loss of
Right.
friendships, just, due to some people maybe passing on. Potentially, some people are not just physically as active
Yep.
and can't get out. So just something for all of us to think about is think about our older, relatives. How can we make their day better? How can we find ways to engage them in activities, phone calls, etc., just to keep their spirits up if they're in that situation.
Hmm. Very true. I think a lot of things can get in the way of doing the things you used to be able to do, but at the same time, I see it in my mom. I see it in other senior citizens at the care facility that she's in. They love music.
Hmm.
They love to dance. They love to engage. So, I mean, there's a lot of vitality in life. It's just how it manifests itself could be different. And I completely agree with you. Being mindful of that and creating opportunity for that to come out is really fulfilling for everybody. Because there is a lot of life left,
Yeah.
regardless of the age that you're in. It's all in the mind.
Agree. One thing that wasn't in the study, but I think it's going to be interesting to watch is what happens to the younger generation. I had an interesting discussion with a young attorney, and she's, in her probably later 20s, married, no kids, dual income, successful career. And I was just asking her, how is it these days, doing what you're doing? And she said it's been interesting to talk to a lot of her colleagues, her peers that are also in successful careers. And she said that there is a high degree of loneliness amongst that group.
Hmm.
And she said she attributes it to a couple things. She says, well, first, the ideal in life is, or what they've been taught is, hey, if you can make it on your own and you can live by yourself, that's success. And
Hmm.
for a lot of these individuals, they went from college, who now, many people are in a single room, not
Hmm.
not a not sharing space as much as generations did before. And then they go from that to a city for their job where they're alone and just like trying to figure out how does that all work. And she mentioned this concept of third spaces, that you should always have a third space. You have your work, you have your home, and then you have a place of community, and that so many of the community places are like no longer around. Some libraries are closing, some community centers are closing, so that all like feeds into this potential loneliness for younger people. I just found that was really interesting.
That is interesting. And I think with all of these changes, the interaction dynamic shifts. There's a lot more online connections, even though they can be meaningful, they are still different. I think it goes back to, again, the need to be more intentional about making those connections, because they may not happen as readily as they used to. And that can be tough on the mental health, especially for younger generation as well, which we have seen evidence of that during the pandemic. It was a scary period, especially for younger generation, whether they are going to school, whether they are early in their careers, the need to meet and connect, and for everybody for that matter. But especially the digital medium, as much as it gives us access, it also can separate us at times. So I think it's just balancing that out and knowing yourself is really important. But community support cannot be underestimated, whether that's family, whether it's through interests. It's really key. It's really key.
Yeah, agree. So I think with that, we will wrap. Is there anything else, Muge, you'd like to add before we close?
I think I will just give all of ourselves a challenge as we wrap up, which is that please create an opportunity to reconnect with someone who you have been thinking about, but maybe you haven't had a chance to see or speak with, and just make that happen and see how that feels.
Yeah. And I would add, you don't have to be a statistic, right, about some of these situations where, hey, you're only going to see your family 10, 20 times. You can change that. You just have to be the spark to rally folks, get it on the calendar, execute on the plan, and make sure you're spending quality time with the people you love best, and make that happen.
Very true.
All right. Well, we will put a link to the Mel Robbins podcast in our notes. With that, hopefully you have something to think about, and more importantly, something to act on.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we'll close until next time.
Thank you for listening. Our hope is to spark a little joy, inspire, and educate our listeners in ways to live an even more meaningful life. If you have reactions to share from what you've heard, please visit our website, refinement.life, to leave a voice message. You may even be featured in a future episode. To keep in touch, subscribe to our podcast, Refirement Life, using the podcast player of your choice. Always remember, you are never too old to set a new goal or to dream a new dream. Thanks again for joining us on this episode. Until next time.